Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Music Rating, Ranking, and Reviewing podcast, what I like to call Music Meltdown, which we talk about music. Yeah. Today, going into the 80s, talking about probably the furthest aside into punk I've gotten, as well as sort of college rock, alt rock, radio, except they did not get radio play, I would imagine. It's going to be Husker Du, led by Grant Hart and Bob Mould. And yeah, they're pretty fucking cool. Not exactly a band that you would think is that much in my wheelhouse, but they've got some cool stuff. With that being said, I knew everything going into this because Taste Like Music covered them before, and that's what piqued my interest. With somebody who's well renowned in that community, Vanessa, loving this band. How are you feeling about Husker Du?
Oh, about the same as I always have. I don't know. Yeah, I love them. My list this time around shifted a bit, but I think anytime a band is a favorite, every time you assess the discography, something comes out a little different. So
Pretty
this is
much.
right. This is how I'm feeling now, I guess.
All right. Then we'll shoot back in like a week and we'll see how it shifts around then.
Well, maybe not that much. There's only 6 albums. There's only so much shifting can really happen, but
That's true. That's true. Patrick, what's your familiarity with the Do?
Grew up with the Do. Big high school band for me. But and they were introduced to me by a friend. We were both Minutemen fans, double nickel on a dime, and that's probably my introductory album to SST. And we could have a whole other discussion about the label SST. Fantastic label. An 80s version of Sub Pop, I think. And it's the first album I heard was Zen Arcade, and of course I was caught and hook, line, and sinker after that. Really loved it. Loved all the influences in that album, and stayed with them, and even saw them live on their last tour for Warehouse Songs and Stories. Um, so yeah, I love the Do. I'm a big Do fan. Who
Cool.
do?
Cool, cool. So yeah, it seems like we're all going in with fairly solid expectations. We all like this group a fair bit. I guess I'll kick it off then because I would imagine I like them ever so slightly less than you both. Important to note, we're not including Land Speed Record. If we did, it kind of sucks, but I don't totally hate it, so I don't know where it would land in my ranking. I'd imagine for the other two, it's the dead last though. So,
Just to get that in there.
yep,
solidly.
yes. Alrighty, so my bottom album, I can see this honestly being a couple of things because I feel like they have two very clear, like amazing records and then other albums. My least favorite, however, is going to be their final release, Warehouse Songs and Stories. Um, okay. Despite this album being around 70 minutes long, I don't get much from anything here. It comes across to me as being a bit dull, a bit neutered compared to their previous records. The vocals I felt weirdly were a bit more restrained for whatever reason to me, and pretty much all of the punk edge at this point is just dead. The biggest elements that stick out here to me is honestly this album. I didn't feel it as much on this most recently listen, but whenever I took these notes, it felt like a pretty clear predecessor to what would later become like the 90s pop punk sound. There are points on this album in which it feels like almost Green Day to me, which I apologize, Vanessa, but that's just sort of what I hear. There's just not much for me to say about it here. I just find the album to be a bit dull. It's not bad. I think that all three members of the band are talented at their instruments, at least for what they're doing. I don't know about their technical abilities. I just don't find the songwriting to be up to snuff with their best material here. I have it at 2.5 stars. I think it's just sort of decent. Not bad.
Oh, I'm going next, right? Okay, my bottom of the list is going to be Everything Falls Apart. I give it 3 stars. It's good. It's there were like the Minutemen, Black Flag. They were sort of in that vein. Dead Kennedys as well. Straight hardcore, straight ahead punk. Speed was the name of the game for Husker Du here. Land Speed Record. They were known for their ferocity, and technically, Adrian Bob Mould is a brilliant guitarist. He's really good and was an underground guitar hero during the 80s, for certain. I had a lot of friends that were guitarists that think Mould is just the bee's knees. So he's very good technically. But here, there just really aren't that many compelling songs. They do a cover of Donovan's Sunshine Superman, which is sort of interesting. They definitely had psychedelic rock and folk influences. And not only can you hear it in this cover here, but they also did 8 Miles High, the Birds, and yeah, and it's excellent. It's a very good cover. They make it sort of fit within the Husker Du mold, surprisingly. But really, to me, there's really only one standout song on this, and it's a title track. You can hear what's coming. The leap from here to the follow-up, Zen Arcade, is the distance is galaxy wide. It's a huge interval. The growth is just jaw-dropping. It's astounding, the difference between this album, the quality of this album and Zen Arcade. They're getting there. They just, this is really as pure punk for a studio album as you're going to get from Husker Du. 19 minutes in length. No song is over 2.5 minutes, I think. Yeah. There are some good, decent, blah, blah, blah is okay. From the Gut opens up, it's got that fury. It's got that straight ahead thrash almost. Bob knows how to crunch his chords well. He's going to get there. We're just not there yet. Wheels, I like. It's okay. Target, I think, is okay. But there's no real, everything falls apart just is a real standout on this album. So I give it 3 stars, but it's not something I go and revisit really at all. It's just, I think it's it fits within that punk sound and aesthetic at the time, and almost post-punk. But there's no craft in the songwriting yet, but it's coming very soon. So for what it is, I think it's good, but it's also at the bottom for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's also my bottom. So it's pretty easily their bottom album for me. And it's not because I think it's bad, same idea. I just think they haven't quite come into their own yet. Like you said, it's just a bit more of a straight ahead punk record. A good one, but lacking in personality from them that I like to see. And we do hear hints, and I also put down Everything Falls Apart as that indication, the title track, to hints of the future. But it's really crazy to realize that Metal Circus came out the same year, because that sounds more like them, way more like them than this does, and it's just months apart. So I think their songwriting comes a long way after this. And as I get older, I notice that punk albums that I really like are the ones where the artists expand on the genre and do something distinctive with it. And this just feels like a lot of punk records of the time, and that came out of that hardcore scene. And it just doesn't really deviate too much from that sound. So I don't, yeah, it's this, like you said, it's good for what it is, but I pretty well never listen to it unless I'm doing something like this, basically. It's really the only time I put it on. But covering Sunshine Superman the way that they do is a hint that they're interested in doing a little more in the future. So we see little twinkles of it here, but it's just not quite realized. So it's good enough. I give it 3.5. But and you certainly can't argue with the length of it. It's nice and short, easy breezy listen. But yeah, that's all you can really say.
Okay, fair enough. Not quite to that record, but I get it. Whoops.
Okay.
Next up for me, just continuing reverse chronological, I've got Candy Apple Gray. It's just, for me, well, fair enough. I appreciate the effort. I don't know. For me, it's just the records after Flip Your Wig. They're You can tell they're like noticeably getting like better produced, probably is the best way to put it. And I just want them about at their grittiest, at their roughest, at like their ugliest. You will see with my placement of New Day Rising later. As well, this one has a couple of tracks I'm not crazy about. Notably, the opener Crystal, I'm not a big fan of. As well, near the back half, I don't love Eiffel Tower High. However, this is an album that I struggled with a lot beforehand. On my initial notes, I had it at 3 stars. I'm up to 3.5 with this most recent re-listen. You see them sort of teetering into almost like borderline power pop sounds mixed in with their sort of punk energy, which I think is really cool. Don't Want to Know If You're Lonely, which that's a great song. It was actually covered by Green Day, so bring that connection back. Woohoo. But no, I think there's a bunch of great songs here. Notably, Sorry Somehow, I think is excellent. Hardly Getting Over It, over 6 minutes, another strong one. It closes out fairly well with All This I've Done For You. All in all, it's a good record. I just want it worse produced, basically. So I'm at 3.5 stars. It's a good album. It's just not quite what I want my Husker to be. So Kenny Apple Gray, number 5.
Okay. Candy Apple Gray is my number 5 as well. It jumps up though, certainly from the debut. I give this 3.5 stars. I think this is a good album. I think uh, there's some. I think I think the standout songs on here primarily belong to Grant. I think Bob's looking for something on this album, and he's stretching out. He's not quite finding it though. But Grant, of course, Grant's pop yearnings and that sweet melodic soul of his, and it just comes across in his songwriting, was always going to transfer better to a major label recording than Bob. But Bob was figuring out some things here, and he blossoms after this album, I think. So you and I are going to differ on Warehouse in a major way, but this definitely, I think, there's a lack of focus on Bob's part. Grant's songs are, I think it's balanced in Grant's favor, but it's still not consistent. Not as consistent as they used to be, and definitely not as consistent as they were on the predecessor album, Flip Your Wig. That's an amazing album, and every time I listen to that album, it really starts to creep up on me even more. But this album went down. I was giving this album 4 stars, but now I give it 3.5. And on a re-listen, I think that, for instance, there's a couple of acoustic tracks on here of Bob's. One I think fails miserably. The other one is interesting. I actually like it. It's got a sort of a late 70s soft pop California sound without the harmonies, but there are characteristics of Eagles and Jackson Brown and Poco in there. It's wild. So I think, starting off, the first track that appeals to me is certainly Grant's "Don't Want to Know If You're Lonely." Uh, and Grant, you can tell, is really like a secret weapon for Husker Du on their debut major label. They were signed to Warner Brothers. That's why you can hear the difference. Like, they left SST for this. There's good punk rock energy here, and there's lots of hooks. There's a gentle, Grant spirit to back it up. I think it's a standout track on this album for sure. Bob's, I don't know for sure. There's some part of the lyrics, but there's some good guitar work on here. Bob's singing continues to improve, I think. I love the organ on Grant's Sorry Somehow. I mean, it's not one of Grant's best songs, but it's a good one to listen to. It's pleasant to the ears nonetheless, and I just think there's a lack of energy here. Um, I do like the organ. It sounds like a Hammond in the background. It's great. I love that they bring in that. That's unique for them. Too Far Down, it's okay. Hardly Getting Over It. Here, Too Far Down is Bob's acoustic number, and I don't know. It doesn't appeal to me. I don't think it's strong, but it's followed up by another acoustic number. And every time I hear it, I'm like, what the fuck? I'm definitely hearing California soft rock, late 70s. It's the best of the two of his acoustic numbers. It's just him strumming acoustic guitar with a nice keyboard accompaniment, and it's got, like I mentioned, that strong Eagles polka influence. No harmonies, but that would come later. But yeah, it's good. It's a good track. Dead Set on Destruction, again, a really good Grant song, straight ahead rocker, very catchy. The title really encapsulates Grant's life at the time. He was under the throes of alcoholism and drug abuse. But it's somehow got a hopeful melody to it, and it's it sounds positive, even though it's betraying the subject matter of the song. I like it. It's a really good Grant tune, and Grant, I think, is a hero of this album. He brings it up a notch or two. Bob's Eiffel Tower High. He's just rehashing some old stuff. Grant's No Promises have I made. Does anybody hear Dennis Wilson in this, or a bit of later 70s Beach Boys? It's wild, without, of course, the harmonies again, but he's got that piano ballad. It's got that real piano ballad feel. It's almost like a hair metal piano ballad. It's certainly before that, but it's got that sound to it. It's wild. It's okay. It's okay. Not one of his best, but it's okay. Um, she Floated Away, great track. It's you know, it's it's this sea shanty. Does anybody hear Modest Mouse in this track? I sure do. Um, Actual Condition, rockabilly. I love it. Grant pulls it off, I think. Really, She Floated Away, Tell You Why Tomorrow, Actual Condition. Grant's the star of the show, I think. Although I think Bob's Up in the Air has a really good vocal performance, and I think that's a catchier tune. Heavy on the pop, and that's fine with me. So, you know, all in all, it's almost there, and I do think the follow-up album is stronger than this, even though it's a double album. But it's fifth on the list. There's got to be a number 5, so this one's it. But 3.5 stars. I like it. It's a good album.
Man, give a review without mentioning every artist.
Well, I guess our lists are going to be quite different.
Oh,
Because my number 5 is Flip Your Wig. Yeah. So after New Day Rising, this was an evolution towards some poppier songwriting, and songs like Green Eyes show a little bit of a softer side to the band that I really appreciate. And in some ways, it's pretty crazy again to think that this came out the same year. That just kept changing and shifting so quickly. However, as much as I am happy with that they evolved into more pop influenced sound, I think that it would have held them back to continue in that punky direction forever. I think the cracks were starting to show on New Day Rising. I think they were outgrowing it. But there are a few songs on this album that are a bit of a miss for me, and that is what kind of brings it down a little bit. Like, not a huge fan of Hate Paper Doll or Divide and Conquer in particular. I don't know that the album ending with 2 instrumentals is the right choice. I don't like back to back. That's not my favorite thing. And for a long time, I blamed my comparatively lower opinion of this album on the Baby song. And while it's sort of an odd way to open side 2, it certainly doesn't derail the entire album. It's only 45 seconds. So it is kind of, it's more than that. I think it's just got less of my favorites on this album than some of the ones that I have higher. And I still think it's very good. I still have it at 4 stars. And I think it's a relatively consistent album overall. And it's really just nitpicking that puts it down a little lower. But it is a bit of a transitional record for them. And I think it's important. I think it needs to be there, but it's just not among one of my favorites. So again, something has to be at number 5. So
Would be a little bit higher for me, but I get it. You love this band. It's hard, so I'm not upset or anything. It is what it is. Next up for me, now I finally talk about Everything Falls Apart. It's my number 4, 3.5 stars for it. I just think that it's pretty much 20 minutes long. Just the energy that they exude on this record it's fantastic. Arguably, I think this is the most energized and like out there that they ever really sound on an album to me. They're just wailing out these songs super fast, super aggressive, just having a great time, just playing music. It's just sort of a fun listen. I can't really go too in depth because the songs aren't that deep. It kind of just is what it is. There's some fun ones, like from the Gut a Good Bit. Their cover of Sunshine Superman is really interesting, as you've all remarked. Title track, it's great. It's by far the most developed song on here. However, I think it closes really nicely with Gravity. I mean, it's not an incredible album. I still only have it at 3.5. I just think for what it is, it's a really fun punk album. It's good for what it is. Throw it on, have a quick burst of energy, get out. It certainly does the job. It's not great. I do like it though. 3.5.
Okay. We're down to number 4. I even though this is at number 4, this is a 4.5-star album for me. I personally really like Warehouse Songs and Stories. And I will be the first to confess, though, that I saw them on this tour in Indianapolis. And this one they get tagged with trying to copy, believe it or not, REM. And you can hear REM influence here, primarily in the vocals, in particular the harmonies here. But they really worked on their harmonies on this album. It's amazing. The concentration on their singing and the vocal work that they were doing, because that's not something you would normally associate with Husker Du. But I was obviously a focus for them here because it just shows up song after song. Like the predecessor was Grant Hart's. This is Bob Mould's shining album here. This works real well into Workbook, his follow-up solo album to this. And it's amazing that this band went from that type of raw fury, straight ahead, hard edged punk to college rock in about 4 years. There's better energy here than I think there is on Candy Apple Gray. It is, as Adrian, as you mentioned, this is definitely more polished. I don't have a problem with that. Everybody complains about Spot's production, but yet when they get more polished, somehow that's a negative. It doesn't make sense to me. And I like both. So, some of my favorite Husker Du albums coming up, obviously, are produced by Spot. But this actually has some real production to it. I think other people I've heard criticize Grant's drums. He always had his snare tuned way up high, which can come across sounding thin and flat. But believe it or not, when you're in a punk band, if you don't have your snare tuned up super high, you're not going to cut through it all. You're going to get drowned out by the guitar. So you've got to do something that cuts. And that's sort of why the tuning on Grant's drums sound like they do. But I think here he's got a little bit more force. You can hear he's driving some of these songs. But I think as far as songwriting is concerned, this album, double album, belongs to him. I don't think it's constant peaks. I think there's some valleys in here, but they're few and far between. And this album really grew on me. Every time I come back to it, it gets better. I think the songwriting is super strong. I think Grant didn't get clean until after the band stopped performing, and you can hear the frustration in Bob's not only songwriting approach, but in some of the subject matter of these songs with Grant. I think it's clear that they were writing these songs in isolation from each other. But if this is your breakup album, if this is your Let It Be, it's a damn good one. And for a band that only really produced 6 studio albums, 2 of them being double, this one's almost 70 minutes. It is, I think, full of really good songs. Starting off with These Important Years, really good opener from Bob. Both Grant and Bob take turns singing lead on this song. You can hear in this song and a few others coming up, the tensions with Grant's drug problems. They're just not tenable, and the divergence in focus between these two songwriters on this album is sharp into focus, right? You got some jangly guitars though. Another sort of REM influence as well, I think here. And this was coming out and during an ascendancy of REM. And both of these albums, believe it or not, ruled college radio for quite a while. Charity, Chastity, Prudence, and Hope. I like that song. It's a catchy little tune. Not great, not a great Grant tune, but a good one. I think it would have also belonged previous on Candy Apple Gray too. Standing in the Rain. This is sort of the signature sound that Bob Mould develops, in particular on the follow-up solo album of his Workbook. But some of Bob's best songs in Husker Du period are on this album. Ice Cold Ice is one of them. And here there's the vocal harmonies, that dissonant backup of Grant's is just, it's perfect. And it has a very REM sound. He sounds like Mike Mills backing him up. Bob doesn't necessarily sound like Michael Stipe, but they've got these harmony arrangements that are just very interesting. I really like it. And this is, one of my favorite Bob Mould songs, period. I think that that ringing opening guitar chord that just plods along and then boom, it just kicks right into gear, just becomes really epic. It's a fantastic song from Mould. One of Grant's best vocals too. It's got unbridled energy throughout it. Love this song. You're a Soldier. This is one of Grant's standout songs on here. It's got that monotonous melody and that is strong vocal REM inspired harmonies again, but it works with the song, and it's the first time that they're really coming into their own with their singing. I think both Bob and Grant really focusing on it. They were always growing as they went on in their career, but man, oh man, this is great for them. Could You Be the One? Oh, these could have been singles, really. Dark pop from Bob. It's both accessible, appealing, but yet still keeping Bob's signature crunch and almost power pop in a way. It's proto Sugar for sure. And it would have worked on Workbook again. It's only 2 minutes and 32 seconds in length, and it's clear that Bob is ascending on this album. It just sounds fantastic. So many good songs. Let me see. A couple of other songs I wanted to mention off of here was Friends You Got to Fall. I really love that song. She Floated Away. I don't want to go through every song on here. Tell You Why Tomorrow. It's Not Peculiar. Really strong song. She's a Woman and Now He Is a Man. This is another strong Grant addition to the album, I think. Up in the Air is great. Very poppy. It's got some great harmonies towards the end of the song. And You Can Live at Home. The last two songs in this album, very strong. I'm trying to fight for the album. Sorry, Adrian. But I really enjoy this album. I think it's very strong. I give it 4.5 stars. Not perfect, but for a double album, for a swan song from a band that I think was very consistent, this is just fantastic. It's great. I think what happened was Warner Brothers pointed to Flip Your Wig and said, "We want more of that." After Candy Apple Gray, I'm not sure, but something happened, and they were on their way back up, I think. Sorry, didn't mean to pontificate.
That's all right. So I have it at number 4 too. I have Warehouse there. So actually it went up because the last time I shared my Husker Du list, they had I had it flipped. I think you had this one 5th and Flip Your Wig 4th. But so that was the biggest comment I got on my list when I wrote my list in the comments of the TLM video, was people complaining about how low Warehouse was. I didn't realize there was such a such a fan base for this album. Actually, it was enlightening. But I see it. I always still loved it anyway. It was always 4 stars, so it's not like I hated it. But it's hard when there's only 6 albums. But there's lots of really strong songs on this album, like you said. I really like the poppier direction that they're going in here, and with their songwriting. But I think they're also not compromising on having a little bit of bite there still. It's still there. It's just not quite as pronounced, but that's okay. I think that's a good thing. I think that the growth is a good thing, and that's one thing I love about them. And one thing that sets them apart is that they evolve. It's cooler to me to evolve and embrace change than it is to do the same thing forever. So that makes this album all the more appealing. And that is especially true within punk leaning music, because there is such a tendency to just do the same thing over and over and over and over again, and that gets so boring. This is much more appealing to me. And both Bob and Grant bring some great melodic sensibilities to this album. It still has a cohesive sound as a band, but it also has their 2 distinct personalities really shining in their writing here, like you said. And with all these great things that I have to say, even have to ask myself what puts this album below the others, because sometimes it's like, oh, maybe this should be higher, but it can't really be with everything else coming up. I do think it's ultimately a little bit too long, but there's nothing bad on it. I think that every song is still at least good. And there's just a few I connect with a little less, but ultimately there's a lot of great songs here. And you pointed out pretty well all of them, listed them all.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But I could hear them all in my head as you said the titles. So, like that's a good indication of how great songs they are and how well they're
Yeah.
written, as you can immediately bring them to your mind. So yeah, there's just albums I love slightly more than this one, but I do think this one is great. I have it just on the edge of like 4 and 4.5. I think it's still at 4 for me, but it's a very high, like borderline. So yeah,
Well,
but I'm with you there. Where defense for Warehouse.
Awesome. Great.
I'm glad that you both enjoy it. To counterpoint, however, Vanessa said you can name all the songs and you can immediately think of the melodies and whatnot in your head. I can't even name a song, so there you go. There's my defense of it. It's too damn long. Anyways, next up for me, I have Flip Your Wig. And I don't have to make up bullshit notes on the fly for this one, because my opinion roughly stayed the same. This is a cool direction for the band to take, practically growing into a bit of a power pop version of what they had done before. On the whole, though, the album is a lot less noisy, a lot less raw compared to what came before it, and I prefer them to sound worse subjectively, so that's the thing. This style still suits them fairly well, and despite there being a couple of lull points, notably, I know it's only 46 seconds or whatever, but the baby song is horrible. It is so bad. It honestly does hurt the album despite it being less than a minute long. I don't like Hate Paper Doll that much either, and it closes fairly weakly with Don't Know Yet. The rest of the album is incredibly strong, though. The opening 3 tracks are fantastic. I think Green Eyes is beautiful. I really enjoyed Divide and Conquer, so kind of surprised that was a low point. I don't know, the whole album, it's just got this cool energy to it. It's ever so slightly different from what came before it, but it still has like the energy and the sentimentality that you get upon something like Zen Arcade or New Day Rising, just with a bit more heightened focus and melodicism and sort of just having a more poppier sound for them. And in the later half, Flexible Flyer was my favorite upon those tracks. I have it at a pretty solid 4 stars. I think it's a really good record. It just still sounds too good for them, I suppose. So 4 stars, Flip Your Wig. Give me the heavy distortion.
Okay. It's my number 3 as well. Flip Your Wig. I think is this Husker Du going pop? Well, they're certainly on the parabola, right? On the top of the curve between punk and pop. They're right there in their head and they're heading over. But it is so supremely focused. It is so bloody catchy. The songs are so amazingly strong that I can forgive a 45-second interlude of baby song. It's not something that makes me I'm looking for it on vinyl. It's hard to find, by the way. Physical Media and Husker Du are tough. But it doesn't, it's not something that makes me want to stand up and pull up my tone arm and hit Flexible Flyer right after, which I do love. I love that song. Um, and I don't think besides that, maybe the wit and the wisdom and don't know yet aren't that strong, but they're still good. I don't think there's a real failure on this album. Um, I think I think this is almost like an audition for a major label to come grab them, and this happened to SST a lot. Meat Puppets, Sonic Youth, Husker Du. There's a whole list of SST bands that went major label and around the mid to late 80s too. Um, and this sort of sounds like an appeal uh, to a major label. And it worked. They signed with Warner Brothers right after this. Um, the first thing that's apparent on this album is, no more spot, no more thin and flat production, right? Here, you've got some reverb, you've got proper placement, some microphones. You actually have a proper recording engineer working on this album. So you hear that right away. And Grant's drumming in particular benefits from that. Where it was hard for him to cut through on, the first three albums, here it shines. And I think it helps. You know, where they were sort of incorporating melody but not giving over to it before now. Here is where melody really takes a turn and becomes prominent. And I'm all up for it. I think this is great. This is, to me, the blueprint of pop punk. They created it here. And I know Green Day covered the track off of Candy Apple Gray, but boy oh boy, this album in particular must have had an influence on Green Day. It just had to have. I'm sure Billy Joe Armstrong, I'm sure he's a big fan. I don't know them. I'm not a big Green Day fan, but you can hear it. I mean, you can hear the Husker Du all over Green Day's pop punk aesthetic. And this album, I think, creates a blueprint for it, and it's great. You know, they don't sound as raw as they used to. I know you like that, Adrian, but I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the rawness either. I love the fury. So I can as Vanessa said, if the band doesn't grow and change and evolve, then they lose my interest very quickly. And here is Husker Du evolving. Um, the hooks and the melodies are all here on the surface. Um, Flip Your Wig. This is one of Bob's best hooks on the guitar. And Grant's drums, like I mentioned, are finally up front and driving this car. They're center. Focus is tight. Bob's composing on this album, I think, is certainly more refined. He's growing as a songwriter. And, their vocals are great on this song. Everything, such a strong Grant song, so Grant heart in a way, and really strong pop sensibilities. Makes no sense at all. Hell, this is a huge Bob Mould song for me. This is the first time Bob Mould has that power, that punk pop sound. This is where he's starting to refine it. I think it's just a serious, it's a serious classic of his. It's a very good rocker. Could have been a single from the album. Early sounds of what would develop into Sugar and his solo work, I think, from here. His singing is improving, hooks, melodies. I can't believe that from the time Zen Arcade was recorded to Flip Your Wig, there was only 18 months in that interval. My goodness, this band it's the growth, the drastic shifts and swerves and approach to songwriting, just it's epic. It's pretty impressive. Makes Hate Paper Doll, it's okay. I'm not a big fan of it. Green Eyes, though, is definitely one of Grant's best songs, and he is starting to touch on. Did anybody get shoegaze sound? Does anybody get shoegaze out of this song? Because I certainly do. His voice is sort of pushed down in the mix in the back. He sounds like he's singing from the back of the studio, but it's got that wall of guitar that I really love. I think this song is this is one of Grant Hart's best songs. I love Green Eyes. I think it's right up there with Pink Turns Blue off of Zen Arcade. And the fact that I think it had some inspiration on early dream pop and shoegaze, it sounds distinct to me. It's almost atmospheric too, I think. I love those crunched chords from Bob. Song, you know, the first three albums, no reverb, no echo at all. This song has reverb turned up to 11. It's haunting. It's lush. It's a lush sounding album or song, excuse me. This could have been another single, I think, from the album. And I think Kevin Shields from My Bloody Valentine has listened to this song because he took some from it. Divide and Conquer. Here we've got some of that old punk fury coming back from Husker Du. So halfway into the album, they bring some of that back. Games, it's a little too long. It's not a standout track on this album, and it's not one of Bob's best. Chorus is catchy, but I think and I don't think it's skip worthy, but it's just, it doesn't move. It doesn't go anywhere. Find Me, decent, but not great. And then Baby Song, Flexible Flyer, another great Grant song. I agree, Adrian. Love it. Very poppy, almost perfect pop, and power pop in its way. He sounds Grant, surprisingly, he's in the middle of some serious alcoholism and drug is why it really makes me think that these guys work together to come up with a debut for a major label. Please take us. It's such a pivot. This album is such a pivot for them. Wit and the Wisdom, there's some nice guitar work that kicks off the song. Keep Hanging On. I love the drums on. Private Plane, it's a good rock song, but it's nothing challenging. And then they never left their psychedelic rock influences, and Don't Know Yet is is certainly there. It's got feedback, tape loops, back masking. I love Husker Du's mashup of that punk fury and then those psychedelic flourishes that they bring in, all the tape looping and the playing, backmasking your guitar, then playing that twisted melody forward on a multi-track. Just a very Beatlesque. Really, really good. They're both good, really good two instrumentals. Wit and the Wisdom and Don't Know Yet are two really good instrumental songs to end this album. And some of the best instrumentals I think that Husker Du did. So Flip Your Wig, I'm strong on it. I really like it. Almost perfect for me. 4.5.
So this is where I might lose people because my
Uh-oh.
number 3 is New Day Rising. It's still great, but
Did this one change for you, Vanessa?
it did, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I've had to take a hard look at it, and some truth bombs kind of dropped. But anyway, I'll get into that. So I think it starts very strong. New Day Rising is a fantastic album opener with tons of energy, and The Girl Who Lives on Heaven Hill and I Apologize keeps it going on a high note. But despite the highs on this album, of which there are many, I also think there are some lower points that I tended to overlook in the past. And this is especially true on the second side of the album, which opens promisingly with the terms of psychic warfare, which is a popular gem from Grant that I overlooked quite a bit in the past. But when I take a hard, honest look at this album, I can't deny that the majority of the second side, aside from Grant's songs, is quite a bit weaker for Bob's end. 59 Times the Pain is probably the biggest standout for me on this side, but the rest of it I don't know, just not quite there for me. And I've always tended to think I favor Bob overall, but not in the case of this particular side at all. And, and with all this in mind, it's pretty difficult to put this album any higher than this because I do like the two that I have above it more. I just don't think it's quite on the same level for me as far as my favorites go. And it is interesting because I at one time had it at number one and had it then at number two, but I just can't ignore that that nagging feeling of side two that just puts it just a little bit lower. Um, I do think that ultimately that moving away from this sound on subsequent albums was the right choice because I think that weakness that I hear is a sign that they're growing tired of doing this sound. They're growing tired of continuing in this direction. And I think that's maybe what I'm feeling. So all the same, still lots of great songs, and especially side one, very strong. This criticism doesn't really apply to that, but if you're looking at the whole album, you have to consider everything. So I can no longer justify a 5-star rating on it. I have it down at 4.5. Fairly strong one, but still. So yeah, that's my number 3, New Day Rising, which I know a lot of people would have higher, but just gotta look at it a little more honestly, I guess.
Talking to Jason too much. Okay. Well, that is. I know you love it, so I'm not going to rag on you too much, but I'm appalled. So my number 2 is going to be Zen Arcade, which, yeah. I will say though, this record grew on me. I am up to 4.5 stars. It's a great double record. So there you go.
Right.
Add one to the pantheon. This record is just awesome. It's Spot. Is he a good producer? No. Do I love what he does on these Husker Du records? Absolutely. It's so crazy. It's so frantic production wise. It's so sort of goofy with how loud they're playing and whatnot. I don't know how much to attribute that to Spot. I think he just didn't really know what the fuck he was doing and ended up having this wackadoodle sound that I just happen to love. However, the songs on here are fucking awesome. There are 23 here, and I can comfortably say 22 of them are good. Counterpoint, Reoccurring Dreams is on here. And do I understand what they're going for? Yes. Do I want to listen to 14 minutes of it? No, not a chance. But no, there are great highs on here. You can tell just the leap from this record to the next one. I mean, not from this record to the next one. The leap from Everything Falls Apart to this record is just mind blowing because they went from sort of banging out like these quick fun punk numbers to like occasionally having melodies and like having these really cool parts interspliced into here. Something I learned today is Outstanding, Never Talking to You Again. I'm not going to list every song because I know that you all have a ton to say about it. So we'll get to that later. But one thing that I do love about this whole record, it might be like my favorite thing on it. It's going to sound super weird. It's the backing vocals on Something I Learned Today. Those are just so cool how they play into the song. But yeah, I'm going to be quiet here. I know that you both will have a lot to say about it. So 4.5 stars. It's fantastic. I just want it to sound even worse. So that's why New Day Rising is my number 1.
You can say it's your channel, Adrian. You can go on forever if you want.
Yeah, if I want to.
I understand. All right. Well, I have New Day Rising as my number 2. So I mean, we're here. We're very close. Goodness gracious, 1 and 2. Flip Flop. It's a fantastic album. I have it in 4.5. The same where Vanessa has it. I think she's right. It is front loaded. There are some weaker tracks on the back, but I think, like for instance, I agree with Vanessa in terms of Psychic Warfare. That song grows on me every time I listen to it. It's really it's Grant Hart's take on 60s garage rock, and it's very appealing. It's really good. But this album in general, it's as intense as Zen Arcade. I wouldn't say that, unlike Zen Arcade, and this is a follow up to it. Bob and Grant, even though I think they were writing individually, their songs individually, they sound like they're writing for the same album. And there is a concept behind Zen Arcade. That's not true for New Day Rising. That doesn't necessarily make it stronger or weaker. It's just not present here. So these are just tiny. It's a great collection of some good to great songs that really elevate this album into the upper echelon for Husker Du. And as they're going, you can hear the progression and the evolution of their songwriting, in particular, bringing in pop influences. The only thing I can even compare some of this album to is like Jesus and the Mary Chain Psycho Candy. It's pretty wild. It's got that thin sheen. Yes, it's a spot production, but I can tell you that both Zen Arcade and New Day Rising sound hella better than Everything Falls Apart. In production anyway. It's leaps and bounds better than their debut album. It's not great. It's again very flat, very thin. Grant's drums are pushed to the back, and he's got that highly tuned snare. Um, and it's hard for him to break through, but his songwriting is so strong that it cannot be denied. Many of the band's, I think, greatest strengths, many of the characteristics of their signature sound are on this album. And it shows them maturing. Perfect example is a song that's sort of indecipherable lyrically, as Mould sort of mumbles his way through the lyrics. I don't know if he's trying to get his voice to sound more like an instrument and a little less like a narrator. I think the title track, there's nothing to the lyrics. He's just repeating the title over and over. It's nothing special, but the guitar theatrics are amazing, jaw-dropping, great energy, definitely a shift in focus away from Zen Arcade. And I think Bob's fight on top of the mountain to stick to his punk beginnings and bring that energy and fury in here. Girl Who Lived on Heaven Hill. Heaven Hill is not a location. This girl lived on a particular brand of whiskey. So when you know that, it sort of changes the focus of the song if you read the lyrics to it, which I think are interesting. But it's definitely one of Grant's best songs while he was performing with Husker Du. I really love this song. It's still got this straightforward punk energy, but it is a nice pop ditty. There's some good hooks contained within it. Really good. I Apologize is not what it sounds like. Bob doesn't sound apologetic at all on this song. He's got a sneer and a sarcasm and a bite to it. But it's again pop punk. It's got that punk ferocity. It's got that energy. It's got that drive. Great guitar riffs in here. Grant's backing vocals are great. There's a couple of songs that both of them wrote. If I Told You sounds like a Grant song, but supposedly it's credited to both. Nice tempo changes, like the riff breakdowns. Celebrated Summer. Here is a fantastic song. Starts out with acoustic guitar, and this time in the bridge, you got some really catchy choruses, and the guitar riffs and the melodies shine through on this song. It clocks in at just a little over 4 minutes. So here's where the Husker Du songs start getting longer, but it's fantastic song through and through. Very strong song for Bob, I think. His singing here is very powerful. He's leaning heavily into pop. It's got it's a structured approach to songwriting, and I think it's a standout on this album. It's got this great acoustic outro too. Here's where Bob is starting to bring in acoustic guitar as well. Again, in terms of Psychic Warfare, it grows. Powerline's okay, not the best, but it's okay. Books about UFOs, I think, is great. I think this is one of Grant's best songs. It's got this country rockabilly punk sound to it. Grant's he's got this nice sweet romanticism to him, and this is like a signature Grant Hart song. I really love this song. This could have almost been a single, excuse me, off this album. It's great. How to Skin a Cat. I mean, it's just Bob Mould rhyming cat and rat together. I don't know. It's sort of a psychedelic. It's a toss off, I think. I don't skip it. It's not even long enough to skip. So it's just I deal with it, and it's probably what brings this album down a half a star for me. What You Drinking Though is a great song. That's a fantastic song, and that is Bob coming out the other end of alcoholism and getting clean. And it's you can hear the angst and the pinup energy and the regrets and not only the lyrics but in his songwriting too. This is a great song. I like this song a lot. Plans I Make. It's the old ferocious straight ahead punk of Husker Du, the previous couple of albums. It's 4 minutes long though, so it's a little bit too long. It's a marathon for a punk song in particular. I like Bob's guitar fireworks on here. I think he's really bending those strings almost to the point of breaking. It's got that it's got that razor wire speed and crunch to his guitar. So I like his guitar playing as a song. It's good, but it's not great. Yeah, there's some letdowns. I think Vanessa was right. There's some letdowns on side two, but certainly not enough to drop it down to the bottom tier for me. This is almost as good as an arcade, and I love it. Obviously, it's a fantastic album. 4.5 stars.
All right, so you've probably guessed that Candy Apple Gray is my number two. It was originally number three, so it's not like it's jumped up some crazy amount. It just kind of flipped the two. But I will say my only real criticism of it is right off the bat, Crystal is not the greatest album opener. They could have just scrapped that song entirely and just opened it with Don't Want to Know If You Were Lonely. Would have been better, but that's really my only main complaint. But if that's my biggest quibble of the album, it's just still a fairly minor one because it's not a very long song. It just, yeah. But otherwise, I think this is definitely an album that gets way underappreciated a lot of the time, with some people calling it their worst, which is just ridiculous. There's just so many tight and catchy songs here. And as well, I just really like that they've opened their horizons into more ballads, which I think are particularly strong on this album. I really love hearing the acoustic guitar, and it's nice to see that softer side. With all that said, though, I think that all the grit of their older stuff is not gone here. I think there's just a bit more of a balance. They've figured out a way to bring that in with a new sound, make it sound is better produced, as we've said. It's major label. It's a bit maybe more for the mainstream a little bit, but I think that they're ready for it. I think this is what they should be doing at this point in their career and how they were evolving. And I just think that this is the perfect combination of both of these sides of them. And I think that they were both really evolving as songwriters, and it's just really lovely to see it all come together in this package. I think they both really shine here, which I know is not a popular opinion, but it's always been an album I've had a soft spot for. Like, it's just especially those slow songs I've always really liked. I've always appreciated this album just a little bit more. And as time goes on, and maybe as I get older and evolve in my taste, I appreciate this maturing of their sound even more than I did maybe when I was 22 years old and a little more angsty. It hits a little different now. This is like their growing up album. So yeah, I actually have it at 5 stars now. I did raise it. I do love it. Unfortunately, it's the only one I don't own physically, which makes me very sad. It's almost impossible to find, it seems, on any format, but
It is, and bloody expensive if you do
yeah,
find it.
yeah, unfortunately. I bought a lot of the other ones years ago when they were much easier to get and much cheaper, but I
Nice.
just never found this one. So
It's a shame.
it
Uh,
is.
All
Because I
right.
have everything else. The live album, the box set.
Ooh, then
But
it's a grail. That makes it a grail.
it does.
Yes, yes.
It's a Vanessa grail.
Yeah, someday, hopefully.
Maybe that'd be a fun idea. Obviously, wanting to own everything, but for logistics purposes, should I stay or should I go? Land speed record. Alrighty, well, time to deal with the elephant in the room here. I'm breaking up a trifecta for my number one, New Day Rising. Is this as conceptual as an arcade? No. Is it as polished? Is it as produced, probably as tightly written as the later stuff? No. It's more interesting than the later stuff. Yes. But anyways, in my opinion, this is basically a perfect punk album. I think this is absolutely sensational. Hart and Grant Hart and Bob Mulder just on fire. These songs, like, sure they aren't the most like complex or anything, but they are just so tightly written, I think. They're so fun. There's so much energy across this album. And the guitars, the tones, everything about them. Sure, they probably sound like dog shit from a technical perspective. They are so cool. I love them to pieces. They're like so heavy, they're so crunchy, distorted, and whatnot. It makes the album. I think that the guitar sound on here is one of my favorites in general. I just think that it's amazing. The drums are incredibly frantic across here as well. And the bass, can you really hear it? Not that much, but whenever you can, it's pretty cool. More than anything, though, I just love the energy, as I've been saying, and sort of like the power that they're able to put into everything. And there is still like underlying elements of like some melodicism and some like catchy choruses across here, which I think is really cool. From old stuff, I've always loved I Apologize. Celebrated Summer, of course, is a classic for a reason. Perfect Example, I think, is great. But for me, I haven't said it yet. I think I prefer Grant Hart on the whole. I think he just brings such a cool melodicism and sort of like catchiness to his stuff. Even earlier on in the band, he brings that too. With The Girl Who Lives on Goodness, but The Girl Who Lives on Heaven Hell being outstanding, and of course, books about UFO being just amazing. Such a fun listen. I can't get enough of this record. It's probably my favorite punk album, all things considered. It's a very strong 4.5 stars. I think it's sensational.
Okay. It's, by means of reduction, it's obvious what my number one is, and it's probably a very popular number one
It's a land
choice
speed
for
record.
Husker too. Yes, that's correct. I know we said we weren't going to cover it, but I'm bringing it in. Wild card. No, I'm not. Zen Arcade, obviously. It is brilliant in its conception and execution simply because the ambition on display on this album, the just massive range of influence from ultra distorted guitars, metallic grinding, melodic pop, prog rock like conceptions for a storyline through an album. They're just assimilated here into one concise, hard hitting, thematic song after another. Bob and Grant sound like they're writing these songs, like they're co-writing these songs together. I know they weren't. I know they weren't. They were writing in isolation here for the most part, but they sound like they're writing towards a common goal, a common cause, so to speak. They're just on an equal playing field here, both in terms of songwriting and songwriting quality and quantity here. I just every time I listen to the debut and then listen to Zen Arcade, I am just blown away by the huge delta in adventurous, extending yourself beyond your comfort. The psychedelic influences here are everywhere. So, you know, Spot was no recording engineer, but I do think he was. Keep in mind, our some of our top two albums are Spot produced albums up here, and production isn't all messing with a mixing console, right? It can be, and no, he was not a great recording engineer. There is a market step up, from a big step up from this in terms of production versus their debut. So it's this at least is not as thin and as flat and as distant as their debut album in terms of sonic quality. There is a marked improvement here. And it's got, it's one punk fueled brief, you know uh influential, strong statement, one right after the other, but yet includes things like weird psychedelic flourished tunes, such as Hare Krishna. It's sort of almost like it took George Harrison's song "My Sweet Lord" and flipped it around on its head. Although it's primarily vocalists. I mean, there's there's some chanting involved, but it's such a unique take. It's basically psychedelic punk. So, and I'm all up for it. I like them both. I love psychedelic rock, and I loves my punk. And so you've got, you know, melody, you've got hooks and riffs, but you've also got avant-garde. You've got tape loops and backward masking. You've got Bob playing guitar with himself, multi-tracked backwards, such as Dreams Reoccurring. And I know that the 14-minute, outro on that one is hard for you, Adrian, but I like it. Maybe because it plays well with my synesthesia. I don't know. I'm a little different on psychedelic rock than some people. Um, I think something I learned today is one of Bob Mould's best songs. Starts out with Grant doing some great staccato snare rolls, and then Greg Norton's eighth notes just bouncing right along and driving this song. Then Bob Mould just starts crunching on the guitar. There's Spot was a huge jazz freak, and in some ways, I think he's encouraging Bob Mould to play his guitar in a Coltrane like sonic quality with sheets of sound here. It's fantastic. It just rains down Bob's guitar chords, and it just sounds great. The ferocious energy here and the rawness, I love it. I think it's a fine. I wouldn't say the concept is that strong on this album, but I think all the songs feed it, and whether loosely or more sharply focused towards that concept. And for a punk album, it's quite inventive, right? I mean, this was the first time anybody had done something like that. It's the first time they brought in other musical genre influences too into punk. And you can, I think, hear right from the start on this album, they wanted to break away from the confining structures of punk and wanted to go elsewhere. And it's amazing. It's their second album, but their ability for adventure starts almost immediately. Broken Home, Broken Heart, some great hooks. Never Talking to You Again. I love the acoustic guitar strumming with that punk energy, and his vocals sound very real on this track. Sort of a fuck off song in a way. I love it. It's a great Grant song. Chartered Trips, another top 10 Bob Mould song for me. He's got that unbridled energy in his songwriting. One of my favorite Husker Du songs, period. And here we go with some echo effects. So, Spot's bringing in some things. There's a great echo effect that he puts briefly on Mould singing the chorus to this. And you can hear it's tight, and Mould is growing as a songwriter. I picked up my belongings in a nylon carryall, heard the porter call, said there's no returning, chartered trip away. I guess I better stay. Perfect. That's some seriously good lyrics. That is feeding the concept of this album. In a way, it's sort of like an urban. It's almost like the Rush song subdivisions in an album. Doesn't sound like the song, but the topic and the thematic elements are very similar. Or Quadrophenia from the Who. Um, it's great. It's great. I'm gonna blow through these so that Vanessa can get to hear, because I know she's got a lot to say about this album too. I loved the warped guitars and the backward masked tape effects on Dreams Reoccurring. I like Hare Krishna. It's got that punk ferocity to it. Biggest Lie, I like the machine gun guitar staccatos on it. Grant, another standout track. What's Going On? Love the shout vocals, and I like the banging piano chords, playing along with, I think Grant's playing those along with Bob on guitar. But then we start to come up to some real classics here. Standing by the Sea, fantastic song. Just one of Grant's best songs. Sound of the Ocean Waves to start it off with. And then Grant just pounding on the drums in a 4/4 propulsive beat. It's another, that and the previous song, Masochism World, is a good 1-2 punch from Grant and Bob. And then I gotta skip ahead to probably my favorite Husker Du song of all time, Pink Turns to Blue. What a stunning song. This is a mind blower of a song. They peaked here big time. I mean, they would have many peaks, but here's where Grant just comes into his own as a songwriter, I think. Riffs aplenty, great buzzsaw tone. It's got this melancholy feel to it. And that's because of the subject matter, I think, of the song. And it just really personifies Grant's composition techniques and his writing style. It's bursting at the seams with this ferocity, this punk feel ferocity. But it's coupled with this beautiful melody, and it's got a pop heart at its center. And this is just Grant in a, to paraphrase, Grant in a short capsulized form. That's really what Grant Hart is about. I love the falsetto backing vocals on here. This is not just a great punk song. It's a great song, period. It really is describing the overdose of a friend. It's got icy tones to it, lament, confusion for the protagonist of this album, I think. It really feeds well into the concept. Just an outstanding song. No more rope and too much dope. She's lying on the bed. Angels pacing, gently placing roses around her head. Wow. Grant, unbelievable. He just blows me away. Anyway, Newest Industry, love that song. Like the jangly guitars. I like Bob's pop side, and it's still, still got the energy, but he's bringing in some nice riffs here. He's focused, he's efficient in his songwriting. And the last song I just want to mention is Turn on the News. Grant's sort of prescient about the negativity that is, and within human beings, the proclivities towards watching and participating in horror and tragedy and hate. But yet it's got these hand claps backing it up in the last half, psychedelic again, I think, in tone, but it's carrying a real good hard rock pop sensibility, both in its form and composition. This, and even, the 14-minute, closing track, I'm fine with it. I don't have a problem with it at all. It's, lots of effects in the studio, probably more than Spot had ever worked with before, but he pulls it off. It's a great psychedelic punk song. It's an instrumental for the most part. Lots of vocal techniques and things like that, but nothing coming close to singing. But it's, this is, to me, there's not one skippable song on here. This is a perfect album. 5-star, easy. My favorite Husker Du album. All right. Sorry, Vanessa.
Oh, no, that's all right. So yeah, it's also my number one, of course. It's hard to really, there's so much to say, but I mean, that 1-2 punch of Something I Learned Today and Broken Home, Broken Heart is such a great and cathartic way to open this album. And then that immediate switch up to Never Talking to You Again, which sounds softer, but is full of venom and is quite possibly one of my favorite kiss-offs ever. Like, at any time I'm mad at somebody, it's like the song that pops into my head. Like, it's perfect. And then into Chartered Trips, like it just would be tempting to just to list all the songs, and they're, because they're all great. It's hard to even pick favorites, because as you listen, it's just like, oh yes, this song's awesome. Oh yes, this song's like, it's just that good. I'd be here all day if I was listing them all. It's just one of those albums that I know I love, and but as I listen to it, I'm always reminded just as to why. Like sometimes when you're separated from an album for a time, you're like, well, yes, I love this, but you know. But then when you listen to this, it's like, oh yes, it's like exciting all over again, and that's a really special experience. The concept album aspect is something I've not always paid as much attention to. Like when I was younger, I was more just focusing on the killer songs, but it adds another level to everything. And it is the piece that makes this album more cohesive than some of their other albums, I think. And there's a narrative and a flow that makes songs like Hare Krishna that may not work on another album work in this context because it's a piece that needs to be there. And there's another song, The Tooth Fairy and the Princess, which is just such an odd little song. But when I was listening to it again, preparing for this, and I had my headphones on, I was just struck by all that vocal layering and then that scream at the end. It's just so perfect. Like it just fits so perfectly into the album, and it's just a piece that needs to be there. I used to downgrade the album a little bit for that reoccurring dreams piece, but when you look at the album as a narrative and as a story, it makes sense to have it here. And I've learned to make my peace with it being there. I enjoy it now. Like, you know, when you're younger, you're looking just for those straight ahead punk songs. You just wanna rock, and that kind of it's a more of a think piece. So yeah, it takes time to appreciate, but I have. So overall, I think this album is where the majority of their best and most blistering punk songs are. I think most of them are here. Songs like The Biggest Lie and What's Going On are sheer catharsis again, but also super catchy and memorable. And I think what elevates these songs for me is that it's not rage for the sake of rage. There's thought put into it and a story being told. And I know that there are so many songs I love on this album, and it still kind of blows me away every time I sit down and listen to it anyway. So obviously it's 5 stars. It's all-time favorite, you know, classic album for me. So
Nice, nice. Well, always love to break up a trifecta. This is the second recording in a row I've done that, so good to be here for it. Glad to hear most of both your appreciations of the record. Sorry about having to head out there. Camden fell down the steps. So
oh,
yeah,
Oh,
it is
you
what it is.
okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
he'll make it. But no, any closing thoughts on Husker Du or
The the leap in quality between Everything Falls Apart and um, Zen Arcade is probably the largest gap between a debut and sophomore album from any band I can think of. They were touring ceaselessly while they were, starting to record, and it's Spot heard something because he brought them over to SST, and what happened during that delta, I have no idea, but it was something. I've never seen growth. I've never heard growth like that before,
mm.
and from both composing, focus, structure, quality. It's just amazing. I mean, right away on their sophomore album, one of my very favorite Husker Du songs of all time, Grant, was really just, he was in fuego. I don't know. I'm not, that stands out to me with Husker Du and their consistency. Obviously, I'm a big fan. And maybe it's because they were teenage, young adults, heading into college years band for me. So they hold a special place in my heart. I
Yeah.
think they're fantastic. I just
nice,
think they're wonderful.
nice, nice. I would like to real quickly counter because I think that I know a record that is a bigger leap compared to Everything Falls Apart to Zen Arcade. My counterpoint is the debut Dinosaur Jr. record to You're Living All Over Me.
Mm, it's big.
Yeah.
I'll give you that. Yeah.
Yeah. Similar leap.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So then
SST as well.
there we go. That should have been
Yes.
that should have been the video. SST Records.
Yes, again, SST, exactly.
Dude,
They were, man, we could do an episode just on the label and picking some of our favorite albums from that label. I could. SST, I missed them. And they were a breeding ground for so many great post-punk bands from the mid to late 80s and on through the 90s. So many, you know, fantastic. Camper Van Beethoven was on SST. Man, they were a super strong independent label. This was they were the personification of indie rock for sure. Sorry, Vanessa.
No, it's okay. I think what kind of kicked them was, well, everybody leaving and the big bands leaving and going to major labels, but also they weren't super well managed either. I read a book recently
it was
about them, and it was a pretty big mess, and
what's the title of the book?
Oh my gosh. I think it's Corporate Rock Still Sucks. Like, I think it's their slow. I think that's what the book is called. It's a great book.
It's a good read. Yeah.
Oh
okay.
yeah, absolutely.
I'll check it out.
But yeah, they've really dropped the ball too on keeping the legacy alive on these albums, as we can see. And I think that's why it's so hard to get a hold of so many of these albums. They don't keep them in print, or it's very hit and miss. It's very up and down. Like, when I bought a lot of these albums in the mid 2000s, it was easier to get them for whatever reason. But I don't know if that was just because they were circulating better. I don't know, just
possibly
in the used market. I don't know, but I think some of them got repressed a bit around 2010 or so, because I did get a lot of the big ones then. But yeah, that's a big.
Yeah, you're right. They're hard to find, and when you do find them, they're expensive. Big time inflated prices, I think. And you're right. I don't think there are a lot of copies in circulation. They were Minutemen and Firehose were like the first ones I wanted to get when I started collecting records again, and I had a hell of a time finding them. And then Husker Du, I was blown away by how the scarcity of physical media, both CD and vinyl for Husker Du in particular. It's not easy getting either one of them. Now Warner Brothers does a better job, right, at repressing their stuff. But the SST is they really they have such a strong legacy. You're right. But it was a shit show over there. I mean, Bot was producing records. That ought to tell you something.
Yeah.
But it's a total punk aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
DIY, do it yourself, screw this polished, overproduced crap. Let's just get this on tape and go. And so you have to take some of that with it, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm going to check out that book because it sounds good.
Oh yeah, it gives you a lot more context to what was going on. They had a lot of legal troubles too, especially, well, there was that big thing with Black Flag there in the distributor in kind of the mid 80s. But then there's a lot of other weird court cases I didn't know about that that involved Greg Ginn a lot of the time, that derails them a little bit. So yeah, it's very interesting anyway. Yeah, it's all
He's
in the
quite
book.
the personality.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of why it's kind of ebbed and flowed as far as success. And but
nice. Soon coming to Let It Be Patrick and Vanessa book reviews. So
I'd have to reread the book. It was a while ago.
I haven't read the book.
Alrighty.
But I know some of the backstory.
Nice. Alrighty. With that being said, that was discussion on Husker Du. As briefly mentioned there, Vanessa has her own channel now, Let It Be. Patrick coexists, so do what you gotta do with that. That being said, I hope that you all enjoy this. Check out her stuff, and you all have a great one.